You have any questions, Bob?
Yes, me if I have any questions. Hello?
Huh? I did.
Hello?
Hello,
Um,
Sheldon. Are we? Okay.
Yes, everyone's connected.
Good.
I do have a thought.
That's all it takes.
let me let me attempt to verbalize that. Um, and it's sort of a little about free will. At one point, I think it was not maybe Sunday or Saturday. We were talking about a saying in Thomas, and let me see if I can find it. It had to do with it had to do with the issue of duality, and we were talking about Elohim and that the issue of becoming Elohim versus being Elohim. Hello.
Okay.
Am I
Thomas?
Thomas? Am I coming across okay? Because I'm hearing other stuff.
You are.
Okay. So, and I think we concluded that we know that we know that we know when we know that we are Elohim, not that we are becoming Elohim. And so, the thought that I have is the only way you can do that is going beyond the duality. In other words, I don't have to step outside of myself anymore to view or observe what's going on. I become one with God's will when I know I'm Elohim. Therefore, hello?
You're here. You're here.
Still? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm just hearing some
somebody
stuff.
muted their phone.
Just about to add, yes. Can everyone else mute your phones at the second, please?
Okay.
So the issue is I know I have access to what the source has when I become one with it. Therefore, my thoughts and my words and my actions then align with those of the infinite one. And I don't have to worry about how things will turn out. I don't have to be concerned with whether actions that are occurring are the right ones given the circumstances. I can just rest in knowing that when my thoughts are aligned or connected with or one with my source and my thoughts and my source and my actions become one, then I don't have to expend a lot of energy, thinking about the what ifs in life. In other words, it reminded me of what Jesus said about take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. At that point in time, that's when I understand that I don't have to. I don't have to have this tension between, well, is this going to work? Is that going to work? I just walk in knowing this. In other words, whatever happens, happens because there is a reason for it, not by accident. And if I rest in understanding that my goal is to be one with Elohim, then that's when I don't feel like I have to be running here, there, everywhere, helter skelter, and my thoughts are running here. That I don't have to do that anymore. Does that resonate?
It does. Which is saying, I think that we have to be very, very cognizant of our speech. For example, knowing who we are, like you said, we don't have to deal with what ifs. And, well, I'm going to try this, but those kinds of statements that we make or thoughts that we have, it makes life a lot easier when we don't engage. You don't have to engage in the wonderings of what may come next, instead of living in the moment. I had a meeting yesterday, and I had to consciously separate myself from the thoughts of shaping the meeting before I got to the meeting. If this happens, then this, that kind of a thing. So is that what you're saying, Barbara Jean? It
is. And it is so antithetical to the human perspective of, the A positive person. I gotta be on my best game. I gotta, when I get to the point where I understand the oneness, I don't have to worry about having to one up someone or be on my best game or being perceived by someone to be at my best. I know my value within myself. I don't have to have external sources tell me what my value is, or shape my value for me, or tell me who I am, or try to mold me into their image. I can rest assured of who I understand and know that I am. And so there's that freedom that you talked about in knowing that.
I was thinking about the oneness during the course of the week, but in a different vein. When the murders occurred in Atlanta, that of oneness came to me in regards to Asians and how Asians perceived us. And now, all of a sudden, they're beginning to realize that you can't hide on the fringes. We are one, whether you like it or not. And when we speak of people of color, we're not just talking about people south of the border and people whose roots are in Africa. We are talking about all people of color. And now that these things have taken place, there is a greater push to come to an understanding that we are indeed truly one. I don't believe that humanity will see itself as being one until people of color begin to see themselves as one. Because there has been such a unraveling of the tapestry of humanity, to the extent that simply because we come from geographically different places, we don't see the unicity in our in our being a part of this this earth, this earthly place of humanism, because it is impossible to me anyway, to believe, to embrace that you are Elohim if you can't first embrace that you are human. Seeing that all humans are the same, and you can move from there to truly embracing the unicity of Elohim. So
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, and and it's not just Asians. It's almost like stuff has to happen to put us at that pause point, you know, to press the pause button to begin the introspection. And we've gotta put it out there in the macro that you don't need a circumstance or a catastrophe to put you at that pause point. That we need to do that before those things happen. So it's the same with folk who are with Jewish people too, with Africans, with everybody, like you said, who's a person of color, to understand that we have more in common than that which divides us, particularly when we are defined externally by Europeans. So we have
Absolutely.
to understand who we are internally as a group, and that we are one more than we are not one, if that resonates.
It does. It does. When it first happened, my first response was, "Oh my God, I feel so deeply for the families." However, it's not surprising that it had to take place for that pause point. And as you said, it shouldn't be that way, yet it is, or at least it was up until this point. And honestly, even if we look at each other externally, we will see that we have more features in common too than not. I do believe that, well, I don't believe, I know, because I had to interact with some Asians when they moved into the African communities in DC with their businesses. The way they treated the community caused some of them to be forced out of the community because they were worse than white people in the way they related to us as a people. Far worse. It was almost like they were trying to be the essence of what white supremacy is in relationship to African people. And they felt like they had to be harder than anybody. So now I am elated at what's happening. What was that? Fred Hampton in Chicago dream is coming true, where all people are being brought together regardless of ethnicity. And actually, that's the reason he was killed. When I hear of the meetings between people in the African community and the Asian community now, which were unheard of before, a few days ago. All of a sudden, this is taking place. Now, I'm not saying all of a sudden as in, why now? No, I'm saying all of a sudden it's taking place because of what happened. Yet it is necessary. And I believe that if we experience something of this nature, it is the Creator telling us we are a step closer. Look at what I'm saying. Last week, we are not searching for balance. We are not to bring balance. We are the balance for humanity. And now here we are seeing not just an opportunity, but an expression of the essence of humanity being balanced by virtue of recognizing that we are human regardless of how we see ourselves. And we are one spirit, one soul, yet we are many in terms of questions or comments about that.
Pastor, this is Rania. I was thinking about this, of course, like a lot of people this week, and I remembered from I took a course in China in my undergrad, and for a while they really were the center of civilization. I mean, they were well ahead of Europe when it came to civilization, and I thought, had they developed gunpowder into guns faster than the Europeans did, and a few other things, they could have been, the force, the white part of the white pole of civil. I don't know how to explain that, but the central culture in civilization, and I think that's interesting because I know in China, this is not an issue, or not just China, but in most Asian countries, this is not an issue because there aren't other people other than Asians in those countries. So I wonder for that, for folks who've got that idea, not just the ones in America, but the ones who are very much in Asian countries where Asian culture is quite different from Western, how this impacts them. Because it's going to be very different, I would think, for them than it would be, unlike Britain, I'm thinking of with white people, because Britain and a lot of those European countries propped up racism as part of the slave trade. China comes from a different point of view, or not. I say China just because it's the largest of the groups, but it's not just Chinese. But do you see what I'm saying about kind of how?
I do.
There's a very
I do.
okay, yeah, and so I that being said, I have many friends who I feel for in this and what they must be going through, and how it feels like me going through it too, and that solidarity that's there. But there was that fine line where, and someone's post, my cousin wrote this post. I didn't agree with it on Facebook, but it was a very interesting point of how how they interact with Africans in Africa, and some of the things that are happening there that we don't acknowledge, or the Uyghurs in China, or I guess what I'm asking for is the spiritual impact when you look at the world, not just America, because America is a microcosm. But I'm wondering if this does impact those folks who are not in America the same way, or spiritually, is it doing that? Maybe that's my question.
Well, I think it's incumbent upon us to have that spiritual impact. And I do agree with you, had the Chinese used gunpowder as a weapon, as opposed to entertainment, they could very easily have been the imperialists, as opposed to Europeans becoming imperialists and colonizers. Even now, the racism, the imperialist attitudes, or shall I say the imperialist way that the Chinese are dealing with Africans, all of that was exported from Europe. And those attitudes have to be changed, just as European attitudes has to be changed as well. The very things that, the very attitudes rather, that has separated us, you can trace them back to those communities. For example, the young tennis player who is African but has a Japanese mom, she was ostracized by the Japanese until she won one of the tennis, what is it, tournaments. When she won an international tournament, all of a sudden she was accepted to being Japanese. However, prior to that, because of her African ancestry, she wasn't. Now, had she been European and Japanese, it had been a different ball game. So where did that attitude originate? It originated in Europe. So my saying that is, by saying that, I am saying when we deal with this microcosm of America, then from the roots of the negativity comes a surge of positivity. If the epicenter of all of the anti-isms, it comes out of this country, then when we change the epicenter, we change everything else as well. There is no doubt in my mind that we are having an impact on China just as much as we are having an impact on South Korea or America, because we are not dealing with it based upon ethnicity. We are dealing with it based upon the energy flows and how necessary it is for us to repurpose energy. Example of that is that when we talk about dealing with it based upon energy flows, we look beyond the ethnicity of the person, and we see the results of the negativity of the negative use of that energy. No one wanted to talk about what happened to the Chinese until now. Like 1871, there were 17 Chinese lynched in Los Angeles because there were one or two policemen supposed to have gotten caught between a tongue war, and one of them was killed or something like that. But anyway, no one talked about that until now. So even in the racism that was perpetrated against the Chinese, they wanted to separate it from what happened to us, because in everyone's mind, we were at the bottom of the totem pole. All it took was for them in their minds that, and we thought the same way, all we had to do is be like the white man and we would be accepted. And in order to be accepted, we have to get an education, get some money, and live in a nice big community, and we'll be accepted. And we found out that it doesn't work like that. And when you look at how casually this young man walked into that place and killed those people and walked out like he had gone in to purchase something and drove off as if he was just returning home with his purchase. When you look at that, that gives us pause. How can you be that casual about it? But not only that, how can you stand there and say he had a bad day? Not only that, how can you sit in a hearing and talk about cancel culture when you are equating the differences between Chinese government and this government with what happened in Georgia? What I'm saying is this: the culture of the world, when it comes to race, is based upon the culture of America. And when we change it, we change everything else. And I hope, Rainier, that I have addressed what you were raising. If not, then I'm sure someone else will help us with that.
Can I make a comment or ask a question? Wasn't his father supposedly a minister, some sort of minister too?
I'm not aware of that. Maybe someone else.
I thought his father was a youth minister or something like that. Because and I just say that to say that not only culture, but religion too has twisted and mangled this thing so much, trying to separate people, keep people separate. Let's put it that way. So religion plays a part in there too. I mean, if he's the son of a minister, how do you get that twisted? I mean,
I think it's worse than that. I think religion is the reason it's the way it is. Religion feeds it. Religion is the source of nourishment for racism, for white supremacy. There is no doubt in my mind. If you remove religion from racism, it doesn't exist. The government cannot do it alone. Religion is the lifeblood of racism. And until we truly address that, nothing changes. This young man's, by virtue of his father being a minister, look at what happened with the people at the Capitol. To this day, there are no major evangelicals or charismatics, for that matter, speaking against that. They don't see anything wrong with that. And if they don't see anything wrong with that, neither do they see anything wrong with what happened with the Asian massage parlors. They don't see anything wrong with that. And I don't know how anyone can rest at night knowing that they are part of this. One of the guys said last night, one of the Republican guys said last night that be aware of this. And these are my words, not his, but paraphrasing. Be aware of this. The Republicans are not making mistakes when they say what they are saying in regards to race. This is on purpose. They are speaking publicly what they have been doing privately. And the objective is to solidify the base of white supremacy. Think about it. If the base of the Republican Party is white supremacist, then the whole party is racist. If that's your foundation, I don't know how you can talk about it on the news and constantly talk about the base, Donald Trump's base, or the Republican Party base of white supremacists. If that's the case, then the Republican Party is white supremacist. Now, having said that, let's not lose sight of the reality that we have brought all of these things to the surface by the depth of our desires, inclusive of what took place in the course of the week in Atlanta. Our desires has been to expose everything. And racism cannot be fully exposed if only the racism that's perpetrated toward the African is exposed. Because we are not the only ones. The racism towards the Native American was exposed and nobody paid it any attention. When the Native American lady, Holland, I think her name is, was being confirmed, the questions that they asked her about how she was going to interact with the Native Americans on the reservations, the oil drilling rights, the road that they want cut in Alaska. All of these questions were predicated on racism. And all of them were an effort to keep the overseers in the Interior Department in place. The things that were done during the last night of the Trump administration to keep things in place in the Interior Department were horrific. No one that escaped us because we didn't pay that any attention. And what Barbara said, that shouldn't have to be anything this horrific in terms of the Asian shootings to cause us to hit pause. If it's not, we seemingly miss the other things, you know? We miss those parts that are spoken as opposed to acted out. Those things that don't hit the news, we miss those. So the question is there a greater degree of racism being perpetrated against the Asian than is against the Native American or the Nanook in Alaska? No, it's in a different manner. Because I'll stop at that. Any questions or comments about that?
And we talk, I'm sorry, let me just say this and that, I'm sorry. We talk about Native Americans and the Asians, but it's the same for the Aboriginals in Australia, or the same for people of color in other countries. It's as you said, Pastor, this is the nexus here in America, because it's what we understand and what we know. But as goes the United States, so goes the world.
Right, and we are so Americanized until we sometimes lose sight of that. And that's one of the things I do believe that actually gives us access, or for lack of a better term, to the power and nature of our being, is that we make every effort to be inclusive of the whole world, as opposed to being just concerned about what takes place in this country. Knowing that this country is really the nexus of everything that's unrighteous in the earth. There is a group. Have you heard People's Rights? Bundy out of the West. It has several websites, and this website is set up so that these people, like the Proud Boys, can, on a turn of a dime, they can set up a protest, and they have not ruled out violence. In other words, it's a white supremacist website, and it functions for their purposes. Now, I'm excited about it. And the reason I am excited about it is because it puts all of them in one place. And when you get that kind of media set up, it gives people a greater freedom to say what they really feel with anonymity. And it also shows you a clearer picture of who is in support of those kinds of things. Not that we need to know who's in support of it. However, by virtue of being human as well as Elohim, we have the need to hear what's going on in order to know what we're addressing. And that is the reason I do believe that our big push was for things to be exposed. Exposure not only helps us, but it also helps humanity to see what needs to be addressed. And I as I said at the onset to that, I think this is simply needs to be a discussion about what we are seeing and what we are addressing and what needs to be addressed. Because I do see something in addition to what is taking place, that that we have maybe not paid that much attention to. Think about this. We've talked about what happened with the Asians. And when we think about what we did, what the virus itself, when we made the statement that it's time for it to end, it was at that point that all these variants were coming into the playing field. And there was this great concern that the vaccines were not going to be effective against them. And matter of fact, in some cases, it appeared as though they weren't. Well, all of a sudden, it's different now. They are appearing to be better than they were expected to be. So when we look at what's being exposed with those murders in Georgia, let's also look at the positivity of what has taken place based upon our desires as well. There is a positive exposure with this virus, and there is a positive / negative exposure with the murders of the Asians. So we are beginning to see, for lack of a better term, light at the end of this tunnel. We are beginning to experience the balance that we are for humanity. And that is only going to increase in the coming days. And it's going to increase with such rapidity until we might overlook it. So let's be cognizant of it while at the same time not losing sight of what is also being further exposed to us.
Hey, Pastor. I think that puts into context what I was thinking, which was you mentioned it exposing it, what's going on in the world so it can be dealt with, regardless of where we are. Because in essence, it could have happened. Another way of China had become the imperialist power of the world, but they didn't. It's the U.S. right now, and it has to be dealt with based on that standard, because that's the reality that's here right now in the physical world. But I was going to say too that I'm reading this book called Caste, The Origin of Our Discontents. And what I'm realizing as you talk is this, talking about the caste system, that racism as we define it in the U.S. is really a caste system, just like in India, but more so. And it's become a caste system of the world, not just the U.S. And that's what we're dealing with, is this caste system of the world that needs to be named as well and dealt with. That puts white at the very top of the superiority, whatever, and black at the very lowest part, and everyone else realizing that as you shuffle in between those, you're still just playing a role in a caste system instead of breaking the system. Does that make sense?
It does indeed. And honestly, Randy, as you were talking, I was thinking about that. These different labels cause us to think that they are different actions, when in essence they are all the same. It's simply that the British did to India what America has done to this continent as well as others. So yeah, I can see that very clearly. Questions or comments?
So one of the most striking, I was just going to say quickly, one of the most striking comments in that book to me was how when Martin Luther King visited India at the invitation of the government, I know, Dr. He went to speak to this school full of untouchables, children of untouchables, and they introduced him as the untouchable one of the untouchables of America. And at first he was upset about that, and then he realized the truth of that. That is exactly what's going on in the U.S. Black folks are the untouchables, and what that means, even in a caste system, and how you're never able, no matter what, to get out of being an untouchable, even if you make money and you become president, and you know, that's how it's been set up.
Yes. You know, with Martin Luther King, that was one of the things that really puzzled me, as I guess the dichotomy of him and Gandhi, knowing that Gandhi was a racist. You know, his tactics, yes, but him as a person, the way King often referenced him, that always puzzled me. And that maybe he was looking beyond his upbringing as a racist and seeing the work that he was supposedly doing. I don't know. But you're right. We are the untouchables. As a matter of fact, Rainier, we are the untouchables even when it came to the Asians until now.
Yeah, that's exactly it. There's this caste system that even the Asians have tied into, not realizing that we're abled by buying into it and being the model minority, and then realizing it doesn't really buy them that much, you know, as much as they think it does.
It actually didn't buy them anything. What it actually did was gave the Caucasian an opportunity to play people off against each other, further dividing and building a taller wall. Pretty much, you know. I mean, right now, let's face it, this is not the beginning of racism toward Asians. They not talked about it because they didn't want to be put in the basket with us. Now they don't have a choice. They don't have a choice. They have to be, they have to look at it for what it is. You are being treated no differently than the Africans are. And if they had looked at their history in this country as we have made every effort to look at ours, they would have seen the same thing with the Chinese on the railroads, the Japanese internment camps, and the stigma of the Chinese being criminal, the stigma of the sexuality of the Asian woman, all these stigmas that are attached to them, the cunningness of the Japanese, all these, the stigmatizing of all of these people, yet they saw themselves as being better than us because of what? Because the Caucasian appeared to accept them more than they accepted us and gave them more opportunities than they gave us. Now they've seen that it doesn't matter how much money you have, where you live, what you look like. If you don't look like a Caucasian, you are in danger constantly in this country and the world for that. Questions are coming.
I've been thinking about a lot of what has been said, and thinking about it from the bigger picture, and then several points. Rainey, when you talked about the Chinese inventing gunpowder and it being invented actually as fireworks, as Pastor Richard said, as a form of celebration. And there were many other things that they invented as well. And in terms of seafaring and imperialism and or the attempt to colonize the world, they actually had the technology and already had sailed across the world far before Europeans even had the ability to do it, but kind of went within themselves and kind of like shut the country in because they had no intention of imperialization. And thinking about they had this period of time throughout history where they just had a bunch of little warring um, little places, villages, towns, or whatever against one another. And then the first emperor of China pretty much bringing everyone under one umbrella to stop all of the fighting. But it was a attitude, and I think about there and elsewhere where there was the technology and the ability to do all of these things. However, there was not a desire to do so. It was more so just of course, they were fighting for their own things that they needed to survive in, small areas, but not in terms of conquering everyone. I wonder too how much of this is tied to Christianity. I'm not going to stay there. Just the idea of the world is mine and is not only here for me to survive, but is here, and my objective is to conquer the world and take over the world and have the world to essentially yield to my needs. And that separation, and even what I just explained, is rooted in exploitation. And as Pastor Richard was talking about with the Chinese on the West, yes, in terms of racism in the United States, in terms of the West Coast, the Chinese were the black man, so to speak, um, in terms of everything that took place, taking away jobs, being put in camps, being taxed, ridiculous things. The first drug policy in this country was based upon racism, uh, with Chinese and opium, even though whites did it as well. But it's just also this idea that white women were starting to like the Chinese a little too much. And then as we fast forward through history, I think about the idea of these different groups that we were talking about, all at some particular point um, being oppressed, but then becoming a part of the system and buying into that culture that we're talking about. And I have a friend that says that when speaking on American exceptionalism, one thing America does, when America, as in the United States, does better than anyone else, and I can imagine also that the British did this as well through colonization, is advertise itself as being exceptional and being a great thing. And then it gets all of these people to actually buy in and then therefore want to take part. And this is the bigger picture and kind of getting sucked in, wanting to participate. I even think about the Japanese culture in terms of how it used to be a lot different. And then they just went into capitalism overdrive where people just started working ridiculous amounts of hours and essentially living in shoeboxes. And that's just the only thing they did. At the same time, outside of those who more so live a traditional life, they have like villages with the oldest group of people in the world that are very active, speak to one another every day, exercise, have like this great community. So from looking at it from above, I just see this exploitive idea that automatically that causes separation and people buying into it, and then of course that causing racism. There is not a group that I can think of immediately that has actually immigrated to the United States, ended up in the United States somewhere, and of course, including those who already were here, the Native Americans, that were not shunned or exploited in some type of way, and then only integrated into society as it benefited um, the like I said, those who colonized and formed this country.
Even,
There
even,
was Southern.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, Sheldon was talking. The thing that I remember that struck me about learning about Asian culture was that it wasn't based in Christianity. So the approach was very different when studied by someone who has a Christian point of view. If Jesus and the idea of proselytizing and have dominion over the earth weren't part of your psyche as a group of people, then you have a very different point of view. And it is the buying into that really seems to have made things worse, so to speak. Because, I mean, even with Christianity, the reason they thought slavery was okay before was because they were doing it against people who weren't Christian. So no matter who you were, Indian, Native American, I mean, or Indian, from it was okay because you were subduing the world. You were dominating the world by subduing these savages who weren't Christian.
Now, in contrast to what you just said, even when Genghis Khan, Mongol, for those who don't know, conquered a great deal of the world, more than Julius Caesar, everyone came under his umbrella in the kingdom, so to speak, but they were also part of the kingdom, and they were free to, for example, practice, follow whatever religion or the spirituality that they already had. The idea of China, yes, is looking at as being a republic and everyone being controlled, etc. The part that, though, and I'm not championing the Chinese or anything like that, but the thing is that they're actually doing all of this. So they live the way that they live for peace and for their the betterment of all of their fellow countrymen. So that sense of order that you have, it is more so to get along and for the, like I said, for the reason of peace. So when I talk about the warring states period, when you had all of these people just fighting one another, they understood and knew and did not like the chaos of all the fighting. They wanted to get along. They wanted to see how can we move forward. It's funny even here in New York. I don't know if y'all ever noticed like anything online in terms of people at a train station or something like that in the Far East. They're in single file lines, like working together. Here in New York, you go to any random bus stop, anything like that, it's just everyone just waiting to get on the bus. There's no order, anything like that. You go to the predominantly Chinese neighborhood, literally, you get in a line as you walk up, in the order that you walk up to the bus stop, and you let the elderly on first. That's just automatic, and it's more so that culture thing I was talking about in terms of exploiting and not even blaming anyone who does that, but you kind of raised and taught to exploit. This country has done that and instills that. That's what you see every day. That's what we promote. The idea of making a lot of money, making a great business deal, that made a lot of business sense, etc. And to completely overlook or is completely acceptable to be taking advantage of someone in terms of the money that was actually made. Somebody who I used to like, who I have a problem with, off subject right quick, a lot of times are um, black celebrities or black people who are very prominent in business. And oftentimes they have essentially played the game well in terms of capitalism, making money, etc. But also at the same time, many times that's at the expense of the most vulnerable, of those that don't have much. And so it's a continuing way of just funneling funneling money or funneling resources, labor, etc., out of those who are not, I don't want to say as fortunate, but not in the same position. That's just not a sustainable model, so to speak, for one. And then, as Pastor Richard, when we first mentioned human beings, is the idea that you essentially are taking advantage of yourself. It is no different from you doing that essentially to your own body for the good of some other part of our bodies. But I just wanted to say that approaching the culture has a lot to do with it. I'm finished.
Anyone else?
I guess one last thing I would mention was funny when Pastor Richard was saying in terms of, I wasn't going to say it, I just found this very interesting. A few years ago, I got bitten by a brown recluse spider, which is very poisonous. And so I was searching out a dermatologist. And I did not know that actually, in terms of how we are treated, everyone else in the world actually has similar skin, I found out, than that of Europeans. So like Chinese skin, I guess pigmentation or whatever, when it comes to dermatology, is actually closer to that of Africans. I just found that interesting.
Well, look at, like I said at the onset, even if you look at physical features, we have a lot more in common than not.
Yeah.
So we are not dominant people in terms of numbers, people of color, without reason. The dominance of people doesn't come from us. When you talked about Genghis Khan, Muhammad did the same thing. The Prophet Muhammad did the same thing. Everyone who conquered, the people of color who conquered, encouraged and emphasized the advancement of the societies that they ruled over. When you talked about the idea of those who were not Christians being enslaved, and they justified it by that and justified taking over the world by virtue of them not being Christian, well, my God, it's no different than the manifest destiny. It was based on domination of the earth itself. The question is, why is the attitude, the dominant attitude of the European one of dominance? Why? It is my belief that the idea of dominance is an intricate part of all humans, regardless of your geographical origin. The way that this dominance is manifested is different. The dominance of the earth speaks to the concept of making sure that all is taken care of. When the scripture talks about, says that Adam is to dominate the earth, it's not, that's what it's speaking of, being in charge of, as opposed to dominating it for selfish reasons. When we look at the concept of dominance from Christianity, we cannot avoid looking at it based upon what happened with imperialism, with the manifest destiny, with all of the other methods of colonization. The European idea of dominance was to take over everything and control everything. Keep in mind that there was no such thing as a deed to property until Europeans came in contact with people of color. We didn't own anything. Everybody owned everything. And that's in keeping with understanding that you are no thing. I think it was Catherine said, brought this up last week, that you are no thing, but you are everything. we're no one thing, we're everything. So this idea of dominance, I do believe, has to be dealt with. And in doing so, we would have gotten to the crux of the problem. Because if we can get humans to understand that there was never an intent for anyone to dominate another, neither was there any intent for the earth to be dominated to the extent that is being destroyed. It is at that point that we can begin to see what spiritual domination looks like, what it is, what the experience of it is. And in doing so, everyone becomes the beneficiary of that domination. When we grew up, we did not grow up in outside of the city limits as did most of the African people in Union County. We grew up within the city limits, yet we had our gardens and our chickens, etc. And what we did, we bartered or we shared. And to me, that was a community expressing dominance within that community for the benefit of all, as opposed to dominating individual people for the benefits of a few. For the benefit of a few. So maybe, just maybe, we need to at some point explore to a greater depth this whole concept of domination. What do you?
I do. As you were speaking about it, there were several words that are, of course, of much greater concepts that I thought about in terms of also a reason of this dominance. And those words deal with the sense of separation, the idea of the exploration also to divide and see it as separate. Fear, and then of course the fear coming from a standpoint of a sense of powerlessness, and I think all of those are connected, of course. And the powerlessness, which of course causes the fear, comes from that exploration and buying into of that separateness. And then in the bind of that separateness, that's what easily allows and promotes that taking advantage of that that exploitation, the ability to do it as well.
Explain what you're saying, please.
Okay. Is there any particular part you wanted me to start with in terms of separation?
Yeah, just expand on what you're talking about.
Okay. When I talk about separation, well, just to give a little history, even when it first started with the Greek and Aristotle, to get into a bigger point of what we talk about all the time in terms of the Bible, there was an idea to divide the world or divide everything to its smallest observable thing. So by the human being, we were not human beings anymore. We were parts that worked together. We were not looked at as being whole. Cells, the same way, the flowers, it essentially how science and man began to think was just taking everything apart. When we start taking everything apart, that thing no longer exists. That same thing within man was to separate and divide man and categorize.
Hold for a second.
Okay.
I hear there's a clicking.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Yeah. Could
your phones are.
Yeah, could everyone mute your phones right quick? Only because it's causing a background noise that's hindering others from maybe hearing. Thank you. But definitely unlock your phone, like if you have if you want to say something, you have a question, anything like that. But other than that, please mute your phones. We have a lot of people online at the same time. Okay. But okay, so there was this idea of looking at life through separating everything. And as a result of that, and separating everything and putting everything in categories, you start to see yourself or look through and live your life through a lens of everything being separate, categorized, myself and others, this group, a different group. What are the differences in everything? What is that particular function of this particular thing? And then so from even a human concept, everything only started to be defined in terms of how useful it was or is, and or the limited amount of knowledge that we have for that particular thing. And if we can't see how useful that thing is, of course, we don't appreciate it. We don't see it as a part of us. We don't see it as vital. We don't see it as important. So the same thing started to happen, I guess, simultaneously, perhaps, with how, from that concept of how you see the world as being different as it relates to human beings as well. So once again, now I only value things of how I can see it being worthy, or if I see it part of myself in terms of being a part of close family, kin, my offspring, my clan, my countrymen, etc. Just very small circles. Well, from a spiritual standpoint, living life or approaching life in that particular manner, now as a result, all of a sudden, you are not part of the kingdom, so to speak. You're not what Jesus spoke about all the time. You have no self-identity because, in a sense, you're disconnected, if you want to say it, from the Spirit of the Lord. The Spirit of the Lord, of course, of what we are as well. So now you're just living. Go ahead. Say it again. What are you saying?
What disconnects you from the Spirit of the Lord?
Oh, you want me to talk about that? Okay. You're disconnected from the Spirit of the Lord because you're disconnected from basically creation. You have now separated yourself from creation. You're not part of God. And when I'm talking about in a theory. Let's make it clear before I go any further. I'm talking about theoretically. Okay, we have discussed on here. It is not possible for you to be disconnected from God. We are simply, what I am simply talking about is a perception of that.
So, what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, we're not talking about spiritual separation at all. We're not even talking about a perception of spiritual separation. We're talking about people who believe that they are separate from God or separate from the Lord because of what they have been taught.
Yes, how they've been raised. And another thing is, it would not be possible to do certain things to certain people had you, or not, and I'm guilty of it as well. If we can see the godliness of another person, there is a lot of things that we will be able to do in that moment. There will be a lot of things we will be able to even think or feel in our heart at that moment. Go ahead. Unmute. You're mute.
What about now?
No, you're off mute. Go ahead.
Let me be playing with it, okay? This is what I'm saying. If that 21-year-old murderer thought for a moment that those Asian people were just as godly as he, that never would have taken place.
It never would have taken place. As Audrey was talking earlier, keep your point. As Audrey was talking earlier, him and his family. His father was a leader in some Southern Baptist church, Crappell or something. I think it was just north of Atlanta, on a regular basis, many times of the week. So no, if he was able to see those people as being godly, one, and then the other thing about religion, please keep your point because I don't want to go off too far. The idea that religion or at least Christianity causes all of this the separation, or it teaches you to disconnect from people, even if you don't become a member of a church, or if you are part of a church. I'm just talking about right now the traditional Black church. If you are part of that church, and all of a sudden you leave for whatever reason it may be, all of a sudden, I'm not going to say that entire congregation shuns you, but in many cases, at least the leadership even encourages its members to shun the person, disconnect the person, no matter how good a relationship you had. Y'all might eat Sunday dinner or whatever, talk on the phone, go on vacation, whatever. To shun and disconnect yourself from that particular person. That is the exact opposite of what Jesus was preaching. My other point in saying that is because you're causing all of this separation, just as we cause all of this separation happens outwardly, the same thing happens in our lives internally. And what I mean by that is certain things that we are taught not to like or not good, we compartmentalize those particular things as well. And then that starts to cause turmoil within our selves. That begins to cause this idea of sin. Now, different things that we may have, or I don't want to say, definitely don't want to say explore because I don't want it to be taken the wrong way. It's just things you completely shun that you could have easily grown through, so to speak, or at least thought about, and you're taught not to do that, which makes it easier for you to judge people and then say this person is a bad person, and it makes it easier to do those particular things. I'm sure that that guy probably did not look at them as being most likely Christian, and even if he saw them as being Christian, for us the stigma of like this is a whole nother can of worms, the sex workers and stuff like that, he viewed them as being a problem towards Christianity in terms of being good. The same idea where a lot of men will Islam. I want the woman to be completely covered up because I don't want to have any. I don't know who I was on the line with, this little kids. I don't want to have naughty thoughts. That seems like that's your problem. That is something that you need to deal with. That's not her. That woman's problem. That woman has nothing to do with that. That is something internal. But your religion has taught you that that is a complete problem, or told you that you're terrible for that. Another way where that internal turmoil has now come out in the open and affected or oppressed someone else. I promise just do one more point. Any questions or get me back on track? Many women die at the hands of men that are dealing with internal turmoil that they don't know what to do with, and they never process, and they have completely shunned or just essentially put on the shelf and will not touch. Many women.
Well, the so-called Christian church teaches men to be dominant over women, too.
Yeah, and that's part of trying to control that internal thing as well, which is what that actually comes from. And once again, when I talk about dominating, I guess if there are no questions, I'm about to go into the domination part. The domination part is that fear and trying to have power over. So this woman is a threat because this woman, once again, I don't know how young the listeners might be on the phone, make me feel naughty. I'm not supposed to feel naughty in any particular way. So I must control this well, I'm just saying in terms this physical human being outside of me, because I can't control or face this naughtiness that was in myself, because I am told that it is very, very bad. That not to
And
mention the same naughtiness that is actually needed to procreate.
And I'm saying all that's BS. The whole thing with that is the problem is Christianity. Christianity is the problem. Why do I say that? The white people do not see black folk as being Christians, period. I don't care how big your church is. I don't care how much, whether you're a member of their church or not, it does not matter. They do not see anybody as being Christians except them. And whenever you hear, especially those Republicans, talk about Christianity, that's a euphemism for white people. When you see talking heads on TV call in people to talk about Christianity, they don't call black folk. They call Catholics or they call evangelicals. The problem in the society is that it's a Christian society. Any Christian-dominated society is racist. We may as well face it. And for a long time, there are things about Christianity I felt very uncomfortable saying because I did not want to be offensive, but I doggone if being a Christian is offensive to me. It's offensive to a whole lot of people. Offensive because a homosexual has to deny who it is. Offensive because people have to deny their true feelings about what's happening in this society in terms of racism. Offensive because Christianity says when you speak the truth about race, you playing the race card. Offensive because Christianity says it's okay for men to dominate females. Offensive because a Christian can stand at a microphone and say, well, he just had a bad day. And it be embraced. And they don't see that as being offensive. So my whole, this is what I am saying. This whole thing about not seeing you as being Christian is another way of saying not seeing you as being human. Seeing you as being less than one of the beasts of the field that Adam gave names to, as opposed to seeing you as at the very least a human. That's what I'm saying. And I'm saying that you cannot separate Christianity from separation. You can't separate Christianity from greed. You cannot separate Christianity from misogyny. You can't separate Christianity from anything that, quote unquote, naughty. All of the things that Christianity fights is what it is. Think about it. Everything it fights is what it is. And the very things that men stand in that pulpit and tell their congregations they're going to hell for, they should already be in hell because they're doing it.
Everything they claim to fight for.
Yes.
They're not really doing it.
Thank you. Right. So honestly, the bottom line is that Christianity is the greater problem when we look at it for what is really happening in the name of Christianity. Look at the dominance, the murders that took place in the name of Christianity. Look at what happened when 100,000 people were killed in Iraq in the first few days of that war. This was called a crusade. And we know what a crusade is. So the whole idea of these philosophical terms, these psychosemantic words or terms that we are using, let's just deal with it for what it is. The bottom line, let's deal with it in understandable, clear language.
And to add one, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, because I might be taking you off just a tad. So go ahead. Definitely go ahead.
Oh, you won't. I promise you won't.
Oh, only thing I was going to say, and to be clear, we're not at all saying that some of these things would not exist in the absence of Christianity. What we're actually saying is that Christianity promotes and points to be straight to the point, a confused or not whole person where many of these things that we're talking about actually exist. It nurtures it, so to speak. So you can have any individual across the world that can actually commit atrocities and be an unwhole individual, or be disconnected, or be going through problems, etc. As we talk about Christianity, we're saying Christianity actually supports this. Not only does it support this, it causes this confusion within man, where these things that we are speaking of end up being a result. It tells you that this is good. I don't know how many people are on the line grew up in the Christian church, but a lot of this separateness or whatever that I'm talking about, shunning people, you need to be a Christian. This is what a good person is. All of these things that a Christian doesn't do. If a person is not Christian, and they're not good. Hey, we automatically say, if you're not Christian, I'm talking about from a traditional religious standpoint, God don't even like you or want you in his kingdom. Your time on earth is to get it right with God, and basically get right with Christianity. And if you don't get right with Christianity before you no longer exist in this human body, you go into hell, which means that you're not good, because God doesn't think that you're worthy enough or to be treated in a great way. Not only is he not treating you in a great way, you're being punished as a result, eternally.
Let's look
So
at the history.
fundamentally, the issue then is that Christians see things very much in a duality kind of realm. In other words, if you're not with us, you're against us, sort of kind of thing. If you're not baptized, you're not Christian. If you're not this, you're not Christian. If you're not that, you're not Christian. So duality is part of its foundation, and until it can get beyond that, to understand that every created being it has divinity, is divinity, it will continue to steep itself in duality and steep itself, therefore, in separation.
Christianity didn't even
Pastor Richard, you all of a sudden went muted.
okay. I'm messing up, man. Christianity, the history of it. Let's look at the history of it. There was no such thing as Christianity until Alexander the Great conquered Egypt. There was no such thing as Christianity. People didn't. They did what they were following the edicts of Jesus. They were following the teachings of Jesus. But they did not call themselves a Christian group, like a denomination of Christianity. They didn't do that. When they said that they were Christians, that meant that they were messiahs. They were messianic. That's what they were saying. They were saying that we not only follow the teachings of Jesus, we live them. We can do what he did. That's this idea of this denominational thing called Christianity did not come into being until after the war, when Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and stole everything he could out of Egypt. That's when Christianity came into being, at the behest of Catholicism. So this thing that we are calling a denomination of Christianity has never been anything except what it is, a perpetuator of everything that dominates, that enslaves people, that manipulates people. It's always been a manipulator from day one. Now, there are people probably on this line who don't want to hear that, but that's the truth of the matter. Jesus was not a Christian, Peter was not a Christian in the sense of the Christianity that we see it. Peter was messianic in that he did what Jesus did. This thing being a Christian in a Baptist church, a Christian in a Methodist church was unheard of. And that's where the divisions come. And they were done on purpose. And we should not bite our tongue when it comes to that. That's simply the truth. And if I am wrong in what I am saying, then may the God of this thing called Christianity take my life right now. I give it up if I'm wrong. I release it if I am wrong about what I am saying. I know historically that I'm right. I know scripturally that I am correct in what I'm saying. And it's time for us to let go of this phony legacy that has led us to a place of self-enslavement, led us to a place of self-degradation, and given us a sense of separateness. So deeply, this separateness is so deep until I never saw, until I think last week, the idea, the concept of European ancestry. That's deep division. Where did it come from? That did not come naturally in terms of spiritually. That deep division came from Christianity. And Jesus never taught that. So if we were to take all of these principles that we call Christian and separate them based upon what's in the scriptures, then there would be nothing left. Even when we look at what we call the Last Supper, if we were to teach it based upon the Aramaic understanding of it, it is something totally different. When Jesus said, he who will stop with me will betray me, that word betray is not betrayal, because if somebody know what you go do, you didn't betray them. If they know you're doing it. But what did it mean to stop? It meant that they were dipping in the same dish and eating from the same dish. And they did that based upon camaraderie. When you ate from the same dish and you knew you were leaving somebody, you did it because you knew you were going to be separated for a long period of time, or you may never see them again. So when they ate from the same dish, it was not labeling him as a final right for the pardon of comrades, when you understand it from the Aramaic. But Christianity teaches something totally different than that. So all I'm saying is this: there are no such thing as denomination. And the greatest perpetuator of denomination.
I was saying, start over. You said there is no, like 2-3 sentences ago.
I said that there is no such thing as denominationalism. Christianity is denomination, but when it comes to what Jesus taught, there's no such thing as denominationalism. There's no separateness there with what Jesus taught, none. But we look down on Muslims, Buddhists, anybody that's not Christian. That's not what Jesus taught at all. He didn't even look down on the ones who crucified him. I'm done. Did you hear me say I'm done?
Yes, we heard you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Are there any other questions or comments from anyone? Your thoughts? Anything? The one thing I was thinking about as you were talking just now was just the idea that well, what came to mind was paganism, pagans, and of course the pagans were, as you mentioned, the idea of European ancestry, and I just want to also say that we are. Excuse me. Could you mute your phone right quick? And if you have a question, you can definitely ask as soon as I finish. The quick thought that I had was as you were talking about European ancestry, and I was thinking about paganism. Paganism is talking about actually Europeans, and it's talking about country dwellers that had their own spirituality as well, had their own beliefs and faith that was not that of Christianity, but Christianity looked down upon them. So the pagans would be essentially the same thing that you would think about as any other people, indigenous people you would think about across the world that are looked at as being uncivilized, etc. And then so that made me think about also I think you mentioned the Roman Empire. And with the Roman Empire creating Christianity, and of course, the entire thing that the Roman Empire was trying to do was dominate the earth. And so when you think about it as far as the Western society, that is not even so much that Europe is the West or has caused this or the current state of, I guess, the world, for a lack of a better word. It was the idea from an imperialist from the beginning who was just trying to dominate and has actually nurtured this sense of domination and separateness as we spoke earlier. And anyone that doesn't fall in line with that is not essentially good. But I was just thinking about all of that and wanted to mention the idea about the European pagans and to bring in context that we're not talking about European as all Europeans, et cetera. We're talking about more so the birth of this idea of separateness, Christianity, capitalism, exploitation, et cetera.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, and I think somebody had your phone on you. You might have had something to say. I mean, you had your phone off mute.
If so, go ahead, raise your question, please. Or make your comment. Okay, apparently not. That being the case, then tomorrow, 11 o'clock. We'll see you then. And enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Congratulations.
Have a
Bye.
good day.
Bye.